Even though most know me, there are some new faces here, so I do want to introduce myself to you today. But most importantly to me is having an opportunity to hear from you and to answer any questions you may have. This has turned out to be a lot more of a hotly contested race than I think was originally anticipated. Those folks on my campaign committee sitting on my back porch back in September said, there are some milestones that we wanted to reach with this campaign, and one of them way, way, way above and beyond that we thought was not even going to be possible was that if we get called out by name, we must be making some progress. Name recognition is not a problem in my race anymore. I was at the Sunbury Big Walnut Chamber of Commerce night before last, and this is the way I introduced myself. I said, my name is Bill Yarbrough. In case you haven't heard, I'm a carpetbagger, liar, and there's no proof I've ever voted for a Republican. If you've heard the radio advertisements, that's what that's referring to. If you haven't heard them, I'm sure I will receive a question here today or two about that. So we'll talk about that. My name is Bill Yarbrough. I am a lifelong Ohioan. I've lived in Central Ohio, in Ohio's 12th district since 1988. Moved to the Columbus area to go to Otterbein University, where I met my lovely bride, Mary. She's a Gahanna native, if you're familiar with the Lucas family here in Gahanna. I am a member of Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, right across the road here, where I was married and my boys were baptized or dedicated. Just very, very pleased to be a part of this community. This is my hometown 912 group, believe it or not. Saturday mornings are rough because I've got a son who's very active in soccer year-round. For those that have been a member of the group for a while, they've heard me speak, and both Joan and RB have been very gracious with their time. I am a graduate of Otterbein. I have my master's degree from the Fisher College of Business at Ohio State, and that's all the demographic stuff, right? My wife Mary and I have been married for 18 years. We have two boys, 11 and 14. I got one artist and one jock, and they don't look a thing alike. We're trying to figure out if the mailman has any of those attributes, of my younger son in particular. Just very, very pleased to be doing this for them. I've never held public office before. And one of the things, starting with my awakening about in 2004, with the second George Bush administration, I started looking at what was then an unprecedented rate of spending. We all know it can be precedented now. But at the time, it was unprecedented and clearly out of control, and there wasn't a single bill that W vetoed in his entire first term. The Republicans had the House, the Senate, and the White House, and we were growing government by leaps and bounds. I felt like I'd been abandoned by my party. I've voted Republican my entire life, including having voted every time for my opponent, Mr. Teaberry. But I was disillusioned, and I felt like I'd been abandoned. And I felt like there needed to be a change. But I didn't know how to go about doing it. And it wasn't until about 2009, with the advent of the Tea Party movement, that I realized, wow, I'm among kindred spirits. There are a lot of people out there just like me who are feeling very, very disenfranchised. And so it was time to come out of my shell. It was some good friends of mine who said, Bill, well, if you want to try this thing out, why don't you run for office, educate yourself, learn a little bit about it. They said, you know, you can run, the state of Ohio just certified for the first time in a couple of decades the Libertarian Party. You can get 25 signatures, you can get yourself on the ballot, you can get educated, and you can get in front of groups as an official candidate to talk about constitutional issues and hear what is on people's minds. So I did just that. For those folks that have been a member of this group for a while, I actually spoke in front of you as a candidate for the state Senate in 2010. It was a wonderful opportunity to take my kids down to the State House, learn how state government works. I got a chance to meet folks like Mr. Carl, who was running at the time in the 20th district, and it was just a phenomenal experience. I didn't envision that I'd be running again for office so very soon. But when I was done, folks came knocking on my door like R.B. Salyer, folks in Westerville and Worthington, and completely unsolicited, completely independent of one another, I was getting emails and phone calls and knocks at the door saying, Bill, you have espoused our values. You are espousing exactly what it is that we feel is wrong with this country. We need a strong constitutional conservative, and we're very, very disappointed in Pat Teaberry. The new 12th district, as it's been rewritten, is 40% brand new. It's been rated by the Washington Post as one of the 10 most gerrymandered in the country. It voted 54% Obama in 2008, Had the new lines been in effect, you following me? Had the new lines been in effect in 2008, it would have been 55% McCain.
Wow.
So people said, Bill, I know you weren't necessarily looking to run again so quickly, but because you do speak to our values and what we believe so vehemently, this is a once in a 10-year opportunity to reach people where there is no T-Berry name recognition, who understand strong constitutional representation, and especially Mr. Jim Jordan, who's Morrow County, Richland County, part of Marion County. His 96% Heritage Conservative Scorecard ranking next to Mr. T-Berry's 55% shows a little bit of a difference.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's what we did. We knew that we could not win this race by winning that 40% of the district that's new. But we knew that we could pull Mr. T-Berry out of his shell by winning those people over, and we did. The polling did not look so favorably for Mr. T-Berry after we spent a lot of time in Waldo, Ohio, and Mount Gilead, and Mansfield, and Zanesville. And these folks started realizing that there's an opportunity in Bill Yarbrough to have representation that's strong, conservative, constitutional, and the Republican establishment didn't necessarily like what they were seeing. So then come the negative radio ads. And we couldn't be more pleased. So any questions about those I'll be happy to answer, but that's a very, very short, 7-minute expose on who is Bill Yarbrough and how we got to this point. But again, as I said, what's much more important to me is that you understand who I am through answering your questions and what's of concern to you and what you feel is happening to this country, and we'll kind of go from there. And Carol's chomping at the bit right out of the gate.
Yeah, I'm going to break the ice. One thing I noticed about the ads, they keep calling Pat T-Berry our congressman, which doesn't that connote the fact that he's been in office a long time, that we have this familial relationship with him, and I think that if you could maybe bring out some things that that you are experienced, you are our values, and that you have a chance to win.
Well, yeah, in each of my radio ads, I make sure to point out that he is our 6th-term incumbent congressman who spent his entire career in politics. I'm not going to do to him what he's done to me. That's not why I got into this race. I didn't get into this race to become one of these people. So I'm not going to call him unprincipled or an opportunist or that he lacks values like he's done to me. I refuse to do that. Matter of fact, I like Pat T-Berry. I voted for him as a lifelong resident. After having voted for Kasich, I voted for T-Berry. I'm a good Republican. That's what you do. Especially compared to the competition, I'd probably do it again. The man, let me talk about the man, because he is a strong family man. He comes home. He's maintained his residence in Ohio's 12th district. He comes home on weekends. He is the first in his family to have graduated from high school. He's a good human being. I hope he would afford me the same, discretion. I don't know that it's going to happen, but I like the man. He graduated from Ohio State, immediately became an aide to John Kasich, went to the State House, was handpicked for Kasich's role when he moved on to Lehman Brothers, and it's been politics, 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 politics. That's not a problem, but to your point, it can't help but shade your view of the universe. And I don't think that's the view that our founders intended for their representatives, to put their lives on temporary hold to perform a public service for a short period of time, only to return to their regular lives. I'm 42 years old. I didn't run for office for the first time in my entire life at age 41 because this is an ego thing or I plan a career in politics. It's because I see what made our country great no longer being there. And it's scaring me to death. But I would jump ship and move overseas if I didn't think that we still had the opportunity to do what Ronald Reagan said, and that's to reclaim the shining city on the hill and become the beacon of hope and liberty for the world as we once were. And I think that we can do that again. Ronald Reagan showed how you could turn almost on a dime if you've got the right vision and mission and divine providence behind you, right? So, yeah, great. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Explain some of the votes that Pat has taken that you would not have done.
Thank you for the softball.
I watch a lot of public TV.
The propaganda on your way out has a nice little short list of those. There's the big ticket items that I would not have voted for, which includes the TARP bank bailouts, doubling the size of the Department of Education. But there's some smaller things as well that I think speaks to his mindset around what the role and scope of government should be. Banning incandescent light bulbs, Amtrak subsidies, being one of the few Republicans to vote against defunding NPR. But the thing that really speaks to that, because you can spin one vote one way or another, especially since I don't have to tell you guys, politicians cram all this other stuff as writers in the bill, and you can use it as an excuse. Well, I had to vote for it because this was in it, or I had to vote against it because that was in it. Look to what legislators sponsor.
Yes.
Okay? Pat Tiberi has a 0% sponsorship rating from the Heritage Foundation. He does not sign on to conservative bills. But what does he sponsor? Pat voted for, or excuse me, sponsored the Zero Down Payment Act of 2004. At the height of the housing boom, what he wanted to do was put the taxpayers on the hook for what was 3 to 5% down payment subprime loans and make them zero down payment to promote more home ownership. He wanted to throw fuel onto the fire of the housing bubble that was about ready to burst. He sees that there is a fundamental central planning role for the federal government. Now, in his defense, he will say, well, Bill, you see that there's no role for government. You think that, you're just lobbing bombs and you want near anarchy. Well, no. I just think that we are confined by the Constitution of the United States, and that everything else should be left to the states or to the people. All these politicians want to talk about how we can cure what ails us. I got this scheme and this plan and this program and this subsidy and this tax break. How about what made us the economic superpower that we are today? How did we become the economic, military, and moral superpower of the world? What was the formula? How about we just do that? Which is restrain the federal government to Article 1, Section 8, if you're a legislator, and leave the rest to the states or to the people. I mean, people find it hard to believe that it's only been since 1980 that we've had a Department of Education. But now it's like, oh my gosh, it's extremist if you want to get rid of it. I mean, how many of us in this room were the products of an education before the Department of Education? I think you did okay, right? If you do away with the Department of Education, education doesn't go away. It just returns closer to the people. Now, unfortunately, politicians want to give these horror stories. If the federal government got out of X would cease to exist. Well, no. If the government gets out of X, it just means X is closer to you. And it's more in your control, in your power. So thank you for the question. Yes?
You mentioned Congressman Jim Jordan, and I know over the summer he was under some pretty vicious attacks regarding the debt ceiling.
Yes.
Wanted to find out, what Pat Tiberi's role in that. I also want to find out, I'm sure there's a lot of support for the cut, cap, and balance that was was talked about. I know it got tabled by 2 votes. Where was he in terms of that establishment? Yeah,
there were 3 bills that were put forth last summer regarding the debt ceiling increase. The first one was cut, cap, and balance. And both Jim Jordan and Pat Tiberi voted for those bills, as would I have, if given the opportunity. The middle one was really just kind of a shot in the dark, I think, to try and embarrass some people. The third one, though, was the one that eventually passed and created the unconstitutional supercommittee and gave debt limit increase authority to the president with a supermajority needed in Congress to override it. I mean, it was a mess.
Right.
Jim Jordan voted for cut, cap, and balance and against the supercommittee. I would have done the same. There's some things I disagree with on Jim Jordan. On that one, we would have been in lockstep with one another. Pat Tiberi voted for all 3. And when pressed during the dispatch endorsement interview on that, he says, well, you have to understand the debt limit is simply needs to be raised to account for bills we've already incurred. I understand that to a certain extent. I want to give him some credibility, associated with that response. But then why did he vote against debt limit increases when Democrats ran the House, but he votes for every single one when Republicans run the House? I mean, either you're going to principally say, I have to raise the debt limit in order to pay for bills that have already been incurred, or not. Or not. Or at least have a mixture of them to where I can say, okay, I'm voting for this one because it comes with a balanced budget proposal baked in, or I'm voting against this one because there are no controls. But that's not his justification. The justification is, well, we have to pay for bills. Well, then why didn't we have bills back then? So,
to follow up with that, a lot was talked about the 14th Amendment and what would happen if we didn't pass the bill, what the president could or could not do. Some of us believing that, with default, we would still have to pay the bill. What are your thoughts? What do you believe in terms of that amendment?
There are already rules of the road that are written in with regards to what is compulsory spending in the event of a budget debt limit that does not get increased. There's a lot of scare tactics associated with, Social Security recipients would stop getting their checks, the military would stop getting, funded, BS,
right.
Quite frankly. I don't want to, willy-nilly and arbitrarily just go in there and say, I'm going to say no to every debt limit increase, because I think that's irresponsible. I do think the full faith and credit of the United States dollar is very important for the stability of the world economy, not just our own. And you spook markets by just going in and being a naysayer, and it's problematic. And that's why I would have voted for cut, cap, and balance. But when you go way beyond with what was created with the super committee, I think there's an obligation to my oath that I take to uphold the Constitution to vote against stuff like that. And the military will continue to be funded, Social Security checks will continue to go out, but what will happen is, I don't know, maybe a few IRS agents will have to take Friday off. Oh, no. I can't say that I am up on exactly all the rules of the road, but I know that it's spelled out with regards to priority of spending should something like that take place, and I think it's scare tactics associated with, you have to be willing to take a stand.
What I meant, though, is not necessarily the military and Social Security, which I agree with you on, but the comments about the 14th Amendment where the president is obligated to pay our obligation.
The full faith and credit stuff,
right.
Yeah.
Even in the case that we were to not raise that limit.
There are few very explicit controls that are given to Congress, and the purse strings is one of them. I think that is a bad interpretation of the 14th Amendment, that the president can simply do whatever he wants, even though the Congress has said we're stopping spending for right now until we can figure this out. I think that's overstepping the intent of the 14th Amendment. Yes?
Before you arrived, we had a really wonderful presentation by Dr. Kessig regarding the personhood amendment.
Yes.
And so the subject of abortion was tossed around. What is your position on that, and does your position have any except fors?
I am a very strong proponent of both what's being working at the state level as well as the federal level as far as the personhood amendment. I think it's extraordinarily important. I think this lack of clarity around when human life begins has had far-reaching implications that are horrible for this country. So I'm a very strong proponent of the personhood amendment. Should there be any exception, not the health of the mother, but the life of the mother, I think is an exception. That's about it. And I feel very strongly about that. Once you start talking about abortion that is then performed outside of those confines, I think it becomes a matter for criminal legislation at the state level. Just like the states today, govern laws associated with murder, and what are the penalties going to be? What are the degrees of murder? Is it premeditated? Da 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 da. There needs to be a new variation of murder associated with this that each state needs to work through as far as what it means. But let's get beyond a doubt here associated with when life begins, so that the states could get to the important work of codifying what happens once that act takes place outside the law. And that's what the Personhood Amendment allows. That debate can't even take place because of the wrangling happening within the courts right now associated with, okay, is this person being granted personhood status or not? And this puts that aside so that the states can get to the important work of actually codifying what happens then when this takes place. Most importantly, this is what belongs to the states with regards to managing commerce. Associated, I hate to say that there is a trade in abortion, but we all know that it exists, right? So as soon as you set that up at the Personhood Amendment, that allows the states to determine, okay, commerce, the trade of abortion is now illegal beyond this very strict confines. So great, we can manage it like we manage everything else, and it allows us through our state legislators where we have a lot more control to manage that. So hopefully that answers the question. If you had any follow-up associated with that. Yes?
Maybe not a softball question for you, we'll see.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know. Is the Patriot Act going to be up for voting again? I believe it has a sunset provision still in it. And how will you probably vote on that?
I will not fault, like many folks have, the original enactment of the Patriot Act, because I think out of 9/11 there was an immediate need to ensure some holes were plugged. Since then, we have found out that there are some elements to the Patriot Act that probably need to be looked at. It should not be renewed in its entirety. I feel strongly that there are some pieces that are very, very big inhibitions to our liberty. The ability for law enforcement to write their own search warrants. Wow. Wow. That's nuts. The ability for the federal government to go to Google or go to a library computer and compel them to hand over records of your internet browsing. These are elements that we have found out in the way we've been waging the war on terror are not necessary for us to be able to effectively protect this nation. But they are incredible infringements on our liberty, and it's information that can be used against us for very nefarious means. And so, yes, the Patriot Act will continue to be brought up. It's been brought up twice since its original enactment, and it has been renewed in its entirety. There have been attempts at removing those elements that are inhibitions that are not necessary to truly protect this nation, and they've gone down in flames to this point, but I will continue that activity to make sure that those things that truly are not important in order for us to protect our nation are removed from the Patriot Act going forward.
Got time for one more.
Yes, sir.
This is a completely changed case. I mean, I believe the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was probably the worst thing that President Clinton ever did, but how do you feel about SOPA and PIPA and all those?
SOPA and PIPA I'm glad they died. I think they're going to come back under. They'll come back during different names, and whether it be net neutrality, SOPA, PIPA, all these different names that come back up. The government is not too happy with the wild, wild west that's the internet, and I love it. And as soon as you start imposing authority to determine what providers should and should not, and allow for equal time, and blah, 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 you're running some very dangerous territory that you don't have to look too deep into history to find out has been used in very nefarious ways. Don't try and fix what ain't broke. And all of the proponents of these bills look to, well, it could be abused by an internet provider. It could be. Well, show me an example of harm that's truly been done, and when they can't do it. They can't do it. Yes?
What are your feelings about the state of our country's cybersecurity?
Oh, cybersecurity? And that's the guise under which a lot of this stuff, the SOPA and PIPA and stuff, is being put under. You can have both the freedom of the people to be able to engage in the marketplace of ideas and engage real cybersecurity reforms, which I think is extraordinarily necessary. I think it's way too easy. I'm not an expert. I'm told that it's way too easy to be able to hack into our nation's security infrastructure, and if that's the case, we need to certainly do that. It's, our national defense is one of the few things codified into the Constitution that is the purview of the federal government, and if it needs more funding in order to shore it up, It's one of the few things that we should be doing. So absolutely. Was there a specific instance or story that you're concerned about?
I'm a bank fraud investigator, and I deal with cyber security issues and understand how easy it is to get into the infrastructure and take advantage.
Scare and take down entire parts of our economy as a result.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And along those lines, I know, I think it came out just a couple days ago that Anonymous has hacked the CIA for the second or third time.
Yeah.
Then they also have this FBI initiative that's possibly shutting down portions of the internet on March 8th for this DNS change virus. What do you know about that?
I don't know anything about that, quite frankly. So I can't comment on that. But it sounds like that'll be very interesting. As RB starts to pace, let me just. I'm going to stick around for a little bit if you have additional questions or concerns. As a young candidate who's never held public office, I'm getting over my fear of asking for money. We need it. Especially if you get mad every time you hear a T-Berry ad. It only costs us about $40 to put an ad on Saturday morning open phones, 80 on Rush or Glenn, and we're continuing to do so, but it continues to need your support. So there's propaganda on the way out the door with our website address, and on there you can either download a form to mail something in, or you can donate online, and boy would we appreciate it. Every little tiny bit helps, and we're going to be running advertisements to the very end, but it's going to take some time. Most importantly is the word of mouth. I come home every night, my home phone number is on my website, by the way. I come home every night, and if my teenage son hasn't scared people off, I get messages, and I return about 10 to 12 phone calls every night, and they usually come from, hey, my buddy told me about you, and I looked you up, and I like what I see on your website. That's how this is working. If you have an email list, say, I heard from this guy, look him up. I'm still researching myself, but look him up. We would really appreciate that.
I hate to cut this short, but we have an obligation to be out of the building by noon. We got a little bit of an extension today, but not much. There are two things that I want to tell you. Thank you, Bill, first of all.
Thank you.
There are two things that I want to tell you. One, I'm going to take off the 912 hat and I'm going to put on the Yarbrough hat. Okay? If you like the attack ads, just think if it was your family that got up in the morning and you had to explain to your children why you were a liar, why you were a carpetbagger, why you were this horrible human being. When I got involved with the Yarbrough campaign, I made him promise me that we would never do that, that we would take the high road. I never expected this out of Pat T-Berry. I thought he was a good guy. I've talked to him many times. I've voted for him in the past. This is despicable what he's doing with the attack ads. And I hope that this is his stub his toe moment. Probably won't be, but in my heart, but I hope it is. Last thing I want to tell you is a quick 2-minute story. I got tired of this. Fed up with the politics already. Personal attack ads, other things that are going on that you'll probably never find out about, things that you guys go through that make this all pale in comparison. Up to here with it already. I met with someone at Panera's. Some of you have heard the story already. I met with someone that I really respect at Panera's, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to quit the 912 thing. I'm not going to quit right now, but you can count on it. As of November, I'm done with all this. This is not for me. I'm real uncomfortable in the position that I'm in, the things that I'm being asked to do. She looked at me and she said, Valley Forge. So what are you talking about, Valley Forge? She said, I want you to think about the thousands of men that endured the winter at Valley Forge with George Washington, those that had no shoes and no clothes. That the only clothes that some of them had were ones they took off of their compatriots that died of either starvation or malnutrition or disease. They endured that winter, and they went on to defeat the British, to give us the country that we have now, so that we can be sitting here at Panera's and you can bitch about being uncomfortable. I'm here. This is an empty bucket. Please, donate on your way out. Thank you very much for coming. We'll see you next month.